Timothy, thank you very much, and I think that the sign of that is that this field needs to improve. That is one of the reasons that I think the Ilia State University has hired you to make the contributions in this regard. Let me now give the floor to the second speaker at our panel, Mr. Andrei Illarionov. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Georgi. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is I think it's a very special opportunity here, this conference, to discuss issues of utmost importance for many, if not all of our countries coming out of this former Soviet Union, especially in time when in many Western countries, interest to the Soviet Union and to post-Soviet Union history substantially fell down. But for most of us, this interest is pretty alive, and not so much that we like to remember what we had before in the former Soviet Union, but because substantial portions of this legacy is still with us. And we're still dealing with them, and we're still fighting with them. And on some issues, in some issues we have received some achievements, some progress, but in some not. And we need to come back to that and to look what really happened and where mistakes have been made, and what could we do right now. I think it's a very good starting point for the discussion, the issue that has been put at the center of for discussion for this conference: why success in transition happened to be so limited. In some kind of in the preparatory papers, there was some kind of put dichotomy that in Baltic countries it's more successful, in some other countries less successful. To some extent it is true, but they were looking to, even in the Baltic countries, we could find some problems even in Baltic countries, not talking about some other countries. And we have to also think about, when we're talking about the success, what kind of success we have in mind. And I'd like to make it clear as possible that the target in some kind of, that in our minds, in our ideas, in our vision is a free society. Free society with free political system, with free economic system, with civil liberties, with political rights, with economic freedom. That is our some kind of long-term target. And in achieving this target, we have limited success varying among different countries. So the main question why in moving to this target, in achieving this target, we have limited success. Where, why, and how can we fix it? The good starting point for thinking about it is our morning session with a presentation of our three speakers. And it seems to me there's a very important and clear statement that has been made. Could you wait? I'll give it, just keep it just in 5 minutes, we'll come back to that, okay? That have been made by, especially Vytautas Landsbergis and Vladimir Bukovsky, who put it very clear the difference between the defeat and unconditional surrender of Nazi regime in Germany and fascist regime in Italy, compared to bankruptcy of communist regime and communist political system in the former Soviet Union and in some countries of Central and Eastern Europe. I think it's a very important distinction, because with unconditional surrender and defeat, and we know that the problem with denazification in Germany and defascization in Italy, we had some, and those nations and societies did have some problems. But nevertheless, they could be overcome in the years. If something is bankrupt, is using this economic term, it can be actually after that bailed out, and it's not destroyed, the roots of the problem are the same. And if it is bailed out, it comes back again. And that is a very important distinction, even if we use this economic approach to the events that we have in our part of the world. So why we did not have the defeat of the communist system, and what are the consequences of the fact that we have not defeated this communist system, and we still have the roots of the system and seeds of the system that are coming back in different forms and different shapes in our countries. I think one of the problems, certainly we could have different angles in the discussion of that, but one of the important angles here is the three different approaches that have been taken towards analyzing, understanding, and dealing with the communist system. They are economic area, political area, and sociological area. Could be many more, but let me limit myself to these three areas. As for economic transition from the communism, from totalitarian economic system, seems to me very substantial progress has been achieved. A lot of publications, hundreds of books, thousands, or maybe tens and thousands articles have been published. It has been topic of many discussions everywhere. It's millions and billions of dollars and euros and other monies have been thrown into economic transition from this planned system, and it was almost universal support for this economic transition from the centrally planned system to market system. If we move to the second area, political transition from totalitarian political system to democratic political system, we could easily see that amount of resources that have been put forward to support this democratic transition was much smaller than for economic transition. The political support in our countries and in the West was much more limited. It's not everybody was for that. The publications that have been made, many but not so many as for economic transition. It has not been discussed so thoroughly, and it has not been supported politically from the political leaders of the West to such extent as economic transition. And we see, probably as a result of this limited support in this and limited push in this area, that progress in transition to political freedom in our part of the world is much more limited than in the area of economic transition. In the area of economic transition, almost everybody moved to the direction of the market. Even Turkmenistan or Uzbekistan is not the same centrally planned system that it was 20 or 25 years ago. So everybody moved there, even just outside, even North Korea and Cuba some kind of made some, even very small, but nevertheless steps in this direction. So, but the third area has not been even some kind of supported to the extent comparable to economic transition or political transition, but is not even been discussed to such extent and even been sometimes barely mentioned in many discussions. It is sociology. Sociology of transition. Sociology of transition seems to me now is one of the most important, maybe not the most important area of analysis, of understanding how different nations, countries, societies moved from totalitarian past to new state. What happened with the society? What happened with different stratas? What happened with different groups? Who moved where? Who gets power? How this power has been used to support different social groups with different visions, with different ideologies, with different political understanding of our future. And this is probably the real core issue for any transition, because at the very end, any transition is dealing with people, not with economics, not even with, it is really very important, and profit and effectiveness, and it affects many people. But nevertheless, what is really very important at the end, what kind of ideas people do have in mind. How do they behave, not only according to their economic targets, not only their political targets, but according to their visions, according to their ideology, what they consider right and what they consider is wrong. So, in this regard, I think one of the extraordinary work, I hope it's come out, yes, some slides that I prepared based on the experience of the Russian Federation that has been done by some of my colleagues just on sociology of current Russian political regime. As probably for nobody's secret, that current political regime is a political regime where all power belongs to the corporation of secret police, former KGB, FSB officers that came to power, and they even do not hide some kind of their roots and some kind of association with the organization. A very famous expression from Mr. Putin: there is no such person as a retired secret police operative, and no matter how you will dress up the wolf, he will not become a grandmother. So I think it's important to just reminding that they are not going to change their attitudes. And another statement from the same person in December 1999, even before he became the Russian president. I want to report, it's just a speech at the Czechist Day party to the top officials of FSB at the headquarters of Lubyanka. I want to report to you that the mission of the group of FSB officers sent undercover to work at the Russian government is being accomplished successfully. Some kind of a joke that has been warmly greeted by the audience. So some kind of, this is some kind of anecdotal evidence, and here some kind of statistics. This data for division of powers in modern Russia in year 2010, I tried to some kind of to measure some kind of the real power belonging to different branches of power, as we have been told by our Western colleagues, partners about some kind of the democratic system. There should be three branches: judicial, legislative, and executive. How to measure the different weight of these powers? So we were thinking a little bit, and we found such an interesting indicator that probably do not exist in some other countries. It's a number of blue flash-lighted cars that carries bodies of bureaucrats. So that is why we found that out of 970 flash-lighted cars in Russia, 0.5% belongs to judicial power, 10.6% to legislative power, and slightly less than 89% to executive power. And out of this, 60% belongs to the people with a clear siloviki or some kind of secret police or some kind of background, which gives some flavor of understanding of distribution real power in the country right now. Another some kind of the slides that show some kind of the number of flash-lighted cars distributed in one particular agencies and bodies of the Russian state. Probably they are too small to read, but I could help you. That just most of these ministries do have one flash-lighted cars for the head of the ministry. For example, what kind of ministries are here? For example, in many countries, people would consider the most important ministry, or one of the most important ministries, is Ministry of Finance. There's those who give him money. So in Russia, Ministry of Finance has one flash-lighted car, or what some people would say, State Department in the United States, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, one car. Okay, who are those ministries on the left? The first one is FSB of Russia, 250. Just one organization. Next will be Minister of the Interior, 173. Third, FSO, it's just as a branch of FSB that is dealing with some kind of security of the top Russian officials, 150. So I think it gives you also some kind of understanding of how the real power is distributed in the country among different bodies of the state. Okay, but this is still, it's some kind of description of the power. What kind of those people who are the top? Here, the data, the results of the sociological study are from Olga Krishtanovskaya, the Russian sociologist who's studying the Russian elite. She's kind of thoroughly studying the biographies, personal biographies of people who are at the top. It's each time about 1,000 people. She found that it is for 2010, for year 2010. That out of roughly 1,000 people at the top bureaucracy in Russia, roughly speaking, about 80% of people coming from Siloviki, which means bodies that using force against other people. Roughly 50% of total top bureaucrats coming from KGB, FSB, about 6% coming from Ministry of Interior, about 23% from Army, Prosecutor Office, and others. So just once again, it gives the understanding of the nature of this monster that we're having right now in Russia. Okay, but this part of the story has been known more or less for some time, what kind of regime does exist in Russia right now. What is much more interesting and even more important for me, at least at this moment, to understand how the country came to this particular situation. And what is good with data from Olga Krashtanovskaya is that she was able to do the similar work for 5 cohorts of top Russian / Soviet political elite over the last 20 years, from 1988 to year 2008. And here you can see 5 cohorts: Gorbachev 1988, Yeltsin 1993, Yeltsin's 1999, Putin's year 2002, and Putin's year 2008. And you can see here some kind of several groups of top elites. Top leadership, meaning Kremlin, presidential administration right now, and a Politburo and Central Committee of CPSU back in the former Soviet Union. Governments, the governors, that time were some kind of first secretaries of CPSU in oblast regions, and Federation Council, it was just parliament, and State Duma, it was also some kind of Soviet parliament at that time. Just look how has changed the share of Siloviki of different kinds, as now we know it's at least half of them are people from secret police, has changed over the course of the last 20 years. Especially just look at this top leadership, the group of people that are taking the most important political decision in the country. Under Gorbachev in 1988, the share of all types of Siloviki in the top leadership of the Soviet Union was less than 5%, to be precise, 4.8%. Now it is more than 67%. It's not now, it's year 2008, it was 3 years ago. This is it is a shock, and this is some people from political science or sociology would say it's a revolution. It's a real revolution, because one group of people just really some kind of broke through to the power, captured the power, kept this power, and actually still expanding this presence at the top leadership. And now it is more than 2/3 of those, according to the data for year 2008, and maybe about 80% for year 2010 and now. That is known. But I'd like to attract your attention to the fact when the most remarkable growth of this indicator has happened. Just look, it happened not in Putin's years. So in Putin's years, if we can get this, even Yeltsin 99, it would be a green column here for the top leadership. It would be 46%. So just before Putin became, the year when Putin became prime minister, next year he would become a president. So 46 to 67%, 21 percentage points, it's a very substantial growth, that's a very remarkable growth. Nevertheless, this growth by some kind of 21 percentage points is less than what happened during the previous decade, from 5 to 46%, which means 41 percentage points during 10 years. And even the most remarkable growth happened in the last years of the former Soviet Union, 1988, 89, 90. There was no such a substantial some kind of movement of people with security background, with Siloviki background into the top echelons of the political power. That happened in Russia from the 1991 to 1993 for 2.5 years. After August 91, after what we are calling sometimes as August Democratic Revolution. Just let's think. Usually revolution has been called by the name of those who comes to power. It means bourgeois came to power. Or revolution which brought to power not Democrats but to Siloviki. What kind of nature of this revolution was that brought to power Sileki to the level that I'm seeing even under some kind of old communist ancien regime. And if we look into this some kind of top echelon of the Russian power in 91, 92, 93 under Yeltsin, those who actually went to executive branches of power could be called Democrats, who some kind of became known during the democratic movement in Russia in the late 80s and early 90s. Yuri Afanasyev? No, he didn't get any position in executive power. Galina Starovoytova? No. Sergei Yushchenkov? No. Just name any person who became known as a leader of democratic movement in Russia in late 80s, early 90s, who got executive position in the Russian power. None. Just none. Just no one. So that is why we can call it one of the most successful some kind of ideological or sociological operation just to present the revolution as democratic one then when none of Democrats came to power and instead of Siloviki came to power. It happened to me that over the last 2 years I was some kind of deeply involved in studying the history of Russia over these last 20 years and understanding why a country has such a political system that it has right now, how those people and some other people came to power, how it became almost unavoidable to have a KGB group of people at the top of the Russian power in Russia. In studying just some kind of thousands of documents and memoirs and decisions taken by different people in different time, I came to very some kind of sad conclusion for myself as well as now I see for many other people that the crucial decisions have been taken in November 1991 when the person that has been known by many people as a so-called liberal reformer, an economist, Yegor Gaidar, has been appointed as Deputy Prime Minister of Russian Federation by Mr. Yeltsin. Since then, since November 1991, many people with KGB background have been appointed as a high position in the Russian government. The Russian government has taken decision signed by Mr. Yegor Gaidar to provide millions and hundreds of millions and billions of US dollars to KGB, to FSB, to special services, and that just such a person as Mr. Gerashchenko, who was with 30 years background in the Soviet KGB and special services serving abroad, have been appointed after push from Mr. Gaidar to be a head of central bank in Russia, and so on and so on and so on. I can continue it for long. That's a very sad and a very painful story for Russia and for Russian democratic and liberal movement. But as a result of this, we can look at these numbers, jump from 5 to 33%. This is some kind of the fastest growth rate of Siloviki with special police background in the top ranks of the Russian power. That happened once again after August, November 91 until late 93. That just we could think how it would be possible without clear support from those people who have been that time at the top of the Russian power. So just it's a lot of information how it has happened, and just we know that these process started much earlier. It started at least in September 1990 when some kind of shocked by success of Yeltsin and Democrats in the election in Russia that brought Yeltsin as the chairman of the Supreme Soviet in Russia in June 1990. There was and after that success of this 500 days program that have been produced by Mr. Yavlinsky and a group of other people, there was some kind of group of people out as have been called after that even publicly. Alliance has been formed. Alliance of the so-called patriotic nomenclatura and advanced special services. headed by two people, Mr. Kryuchkov from KGB and Mr. Pavlov from the Soviet government. So they came with the program to to stop this process of disintegration of the Soviet Union and the process of this leading to collapse of the Soviet Union, and they came with the idea of stabilization. That stabilization had two elements. One was called political stabilization, and the other was economic stabilization. In charge of political stabilization was Mr. Kryuchkov, and it was understood that it would be necessary to push down national liberation movements in republics outside of Russia and in Russia, just as a sort of dealing with Mr. Yeltsin and then stopping that movement. In terms of economic stabilization, it was a program of Mr. Pavlov, as just some it's meaning converting the centrally planned system to market system with keeping political control with the same people, with the same nomenclatura. Let's move to markets, let's marketize Soviet economy, let's monetize Soviet economy, but keep political power with the same group of people. I can talk about this for long, I would stop just discussing this, but just the main idea that the beginning of this implementation of this plan was January 1991 in Vilnius, with attack on Vilnius TV tower and with killing of people in Vilnius, and with attack on Latvian custom officers, with killing several of all those people. As we know what happened, but it was impossible to move forward in Lithuania and Latvia in January. But instead of that, next day after the stopping bloodshed in Vilnius, next day after that, on January 14th, Mr. Pavlov has been appointed as the Prime Minister, the last Prime Minister of the Soviet Union, and he started to implement this program of economic stabilization with a number of measures. Some people still remember exchange of these so-called 50 and 100 ruble banknotes with the raise of prices on April 2nd and so on. The program that has been prepared by a special institute that has been established by the Council of Soviet government and given to Mr. Gaidar, who was producing this economic program. In August 91, just after election of Mr. Yeltsin as the president of Russia, it became known that it is impossible to stop this movement, so-called in a soft bureaucratic way. It was necessary to just use force, and that force tried to be used in August 91. As we know, that attempt failed, and two leaders of this movement, Mr. Kryuchkov and Pavlov, went to jail. And after that, second generation or second level of this group came to the public and succeeded to get a substantial position in the Russian government in November 91. And since then, we have seen the implementation of the same program, so-called economic stabilization program, since November 91 in Russia, with giving a lot of assets, a lot of money to nomenclatura, to former KGB, FSB officers, just to preserve the economic fundamentals of the former political system. Now, let me come back to to my final part of this presentation concerning what can be done right now in Russia as well as some other countries. We have been told for not only for last 20 years, but for previous years actually, for almost half a century after the Second World War, that by our Western colleagues, and it seems to me they sincerely believe that it is true, that economic transformation of the communist regimes could destroy the very fundamentals of this unhuman system. That if we or somebody else would introduce market reforms, would introduce markets, so that markets would bring food, would bring goods, would bring cars, would bring access to to Western technologies, to Western ideas, and it eventually would bring democracy and human rights and so on, and it would be end of this system. we have not only theoretical but practical experience. It is possible to introduce market, and market does really bring food and goods and cars and better apartments and travel around the world and so on. It's true. But markets do not bring democracy. Markets do not bring human rights. As we know historically, that's not some kind of big invention actually. We will look into the history of the civilization. Markets did exist for centuries and 1,000 years around the world. And markets in many places like in Maghreb or some kind of in Persian Gulf, they were producing, for example, slave markets. It's very far from democracy and human rights. So markets themselves, only markets, only economic reforms cannot create free societies. It's a very important element and a very substantial element of free society, but it is not free society. Free society cannot be constructed out of market only. So it should be taking special efforts for construction, for supporting, for developing free societies, and especially in such areas like political system, rule of law, legal system, ideology, and so on. And here we're coming to, it's really just people who are coming from totalitarian society, with few exceptions, are not those people who are instinctively ready to undertake and just to understand what does it mean freedom. If just, let's say, tomorrow the Kim in North Korea would go out, North Korea would not come overnight liberal democracy like Switzerland. It's just impossible because people there have a very different experience. They have very different visions, and that is why it takes very substantial efforts to bring them out of the concentration camp in which they are spending more than 60 years to something more or less normal state. I've been to North Korea and I've just saw the society and saw these people. This is a really tragic situation. It's incomparable even to the former Soviet Union. People just mentally, destroyed. People do not understand some kind of basic stuff, what's going outside of the country. One of the most depressing, my personal experience was a couple of years ago that I traveled to one of the settlements in Siberia, where 50 years ago was located Gulag camp, one of the Gulag camps. And as you know, after Stalin's death and various decisions and Khrushchev's decision, they banned Gulag, they closed the camps. What happened with the people, those millions of prisoners who have been in those camps? Some of them returned to their homes, but not all of them, not many of them. Many of them stayed there in those settlements near those gulags or maybe the camps. And I've been in one of them. This is really most depressing because that settlement may be 3,000-4,000 people. It's those people who are A, prisoners there, and second, they were guards of those prisoners there. And they live together, hand by hand, for these 50-60 years since the closure of the camp. And everybody knows who was whom 50-60 years ago. And the new generation kids coming, and the grandsons and granddaughters coming, and everybody knows from which family they are coming. And it is just striking because all high position in this mini society, this mini example of this society, are occupied by former guards. All these local authorities, all local business people, all local people just really having whatever power, they all from the former guards and former prisoners, different businesses, different activities, but they have no power of any kind. And just you go to this place and you just, through the eyes of those people, through those faces of those people, you understand that the shape of this system has changed a little bit, but nature is the same. So that is why it's probably the most striking example, but to some extent for Russia and maybe for other places, it could be very similar. And there should be very particular and serious efforts undertaken just to take people out of this situation and to change not only economic situation, that does not change the sociological structure, and the only political changes, some kind of announcement, let's have election. As we know, even just free election cannot happen in some part of our former Soviet Union. But just even that does not change many things, and should be very particular special efforts undertaken towards those people. It's not easy, it is very difficult, and actually it creates also a very substantial paradox or contradiction for people with liberal background, liberal vision and so on, because it is considered to be something inconceivable, not correct to impose own views on other people, because it's considered to be a propaganda or agitation or whatever, just something that is considered not right, morally not right, ethically not right for liberal vision. But just it's a very serious issue, because those people who came from this totalitarian society, they cannot, by definition, from the very beginning, to have views of free society. What is freedom means? What freedom, economic, political, personal? Just they sometimes don't have the idea. And as we know, in many cases, people who have been raised in slavery society, they have viewed that slavery is the best possible option for people. So that is why it's a very serious, probably the most serious task for those who would like to see our part of the world free, is how to address those issues and how to teach people in our countries to be free, to sustain them free, and to support them in their movement towards free society and free economy and free political system. Thank you.